everybody. Welcome back to Amazon seller account suspension trends. Lots to talk about today. I'm going to speak for a handful of minutes about escalation mistakes that we see, and then I'll spend the rest of the time talking about how to fix those or how to avoid those. The motivation driving this video today is that we see so many mistakes that are actually cutting off paths that could have been useful for future escalations by sending in incomplete or unprofessional or inaccurate escalation content. Now you're just harming your ability to escalate properly later. It doesn't mean that we don't take people on who have attempted escalations on their own, failed, and then hired us later. We do have to redo it. It makes it a steeper hill to climb. It means potentially more waiting in terms of Amazon needing to review your escalations. It means lost time, lost revenue, and also lost appeals paths, right? So I'm still trying to talk to as many sellers as possible to figure out why they're making some basic or obvious mistakes when they escalate. What I'm mostly referring to is reinstatement appeals. It's alarming to see so many full account suspensions with so many poor escalations going in, because that's just cutting yourself off at the knee for something that's potentially the life of your business, the ability to revive it. And I would think that wouldn't be something you'd take lightly, or that you would expect to just magically resolve itself, even if you're not 100% sure what you're doing. Obviously, we work on these 24/7. We see these all the time, the good, the bad, the ugly, in terms of reinstatement appeals people do for themselves, or escalation appeals that maybe they hire some service to do for them. I'm not seeing a lot of quality difference between the third-party service provider appeals and the ones that are DIY. That's another trend I'll be talking about on our Seller Performance Solutions podcast, but also in these videos, because it seems to be worsening. I don't know if that's the ChatGPT effect, like I'm going to use AI to write an escalation email and send it off to Jeff, or send it off to Dharmesh, or one of the escalations executives that we typically see people contacting. But it's really bad strategy, if it is a strategy at all. Some people seem to just be winging it, and I'm not sure why. It's just an improper way to pursue it. There's no point doing an escalation at all. It's better to do nothing than to do some of the things I see sellers doing. And just some background in terms of why we see some of the mistakes. I think it's because people are consuming content from all over the spectrum now. It's not just, oh, I saw this random LinkedIn post, or I saw some basic sounding appeals video on YouTube about how to get reinstated. I mean, that's how it used to be. Now people are seeing stuff on Reddit, the forums. Some people told me they went to masterminds or hacks or whatever it might be, seller hacks, and they got these recommendations from people who said they did it in the past and it worked. I think you can't just copy and paste whatever they did and apply it to your situation, number one. Number two, it could be dumb luck. Just because something works once or twice doesn't mean it'll work 100 times out of 110 times, or something where you really need it to be reliable numbers. You need some data, some specifics, some factual information backing up why you escalate to certain people at Amazon or to certain teams at Amazon, right? Because you might only get one crack at some of those appeals paths. Most of the brands that we work with, when they get a top seller ASIN down, or they get their whole account taken down, they're losing large amounts of revenue. And even if they weren't losing huge amounts on a particular ASIN, or even if they're only suspended for a few days, we get them reinstated, they didn't lose a crazy amount of money. They're still losing sales rank. They're still sweating it out just in case Amazon puts them through paces a few more times on a few more appeals. It could take another couple of weeks, right? No one really can guarantee exactly how long any one type of suspension is going to take. So you have to be precise with this stuff. I certainly wouldn't just take something you wrote that was submitted previously and Seller Central that got through, that got an ASIN reinstated, and just assume it'll work again with swapping out some numbers or swapping out the ASIN. We do tend to see a lot of people equating an escalation email with a panic email. And that's either something they dash off hastily because they are panicked, which of course, being panicked and writing something that goes to an Amazon executive, that's probably the worst decision you could make in that situation. But however understandable it might be, but be that as it may, even if it's not rushed, we're seeing subpar escalation content that may have even been reworked 2 or 3 times. Again, maybe it's because people are consuming information from all over the spectrum, all over the internet, all over YouTube, all over LinkedIn. I'm not sure. I see lots of stuff that doesn't add up, that doesn't make any sense to me. I see a lot of sellers not considering the source. Best example I can think of is maybe a marketing agency or even some full service agencies lecturing on LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever about compliance issues that they don't really have much familiarity with, or escalation appeals for reinstatement of an account that they've probably only done a few times in their life as an agency. It just doesn't make sense to accept that advice as gold. You should at least fact check it or double check it. And that doesn't mean calling everyone that has Google ads saying they're an account reinstatement service, right? Everyone and my mother and your grandmother and your uncle are offering reinstatement services now, right? That's just going to continue. People think it's lucrative. People think there's a market there. So whether or not they have experience in that area, they're going to keep promoting it. That doesn't mean you have to fall for it, right? If you are quizzing them on how they escalate reinstatement appeals, you got yourself stuck, or they did a couple appeals for you and they're stuck while working with you, you have to deep dive into what is the actual strategy and also what is the language and the escalations they're putting together for you, or if you're doing it at home, what you're doing DIY style in terms of, is it just one basic escalation and you sent it to Jeff and you sent it to Dharmesh and you sent it to this person, that person, that person, and it's the same, pretty much the same thing with no modification, with no adjustments, with no updated information, with no double checking the accuracy of revenue loss numbers, or no real reference to how Amazon's handled appeals on their side. That's another huge mistake I see people making. If you can avoid this one mistake, actually, you'll increase your odds by quite a bit by at least recounting what you've done so far so that they don't knee-jerk a reaction and say, well, you know, why didn't you talk to account health? Why didn't you talk to seller support? If you've already addressed that, you've already done that, and they're still saying, well, you should have talked to account health and you already told them that you did and it didn't do anything, that's a different kind of problem, but you can use that in your escalation that you send in next time, right? If you're not putting them through that process of a bulleted timeline, different teams, different names of people you dealt with, different mistakes they may have made in responding to you, or if they kept sending the same copy and paste answer no matter what you sent in, there you go. That's another reason to escalate it. But that has to go into your escalation. I can't tell you how many sellers just completely fumble that, forget about it. They're sloppy. They don't document prior escalations, the results, what they said, what Amazon said, who it went to, how long it takes for them to respond to you. Did they tell you to wait 6 or 7 days and then they sent you a copy and paste boilerplate message? Again, that's ammunition you can fire back in terms of, look, I did what you told me to do. I followed the protocols. I followed procedure, called account health, got the usual runaround. I called a few extra times. 6 people told me 6 totally different takes on my appeal, why it was rejected. They couldn't specify any other reasons. And then we escalated it to so-and-so, and we got the same boilerplate response. That's crucial to include in your escalations. Otherwise, if you're just spamming people with the same content over and over, you're just burning bridges, right? That's the best way to put it. You're not advancing the case or cause. You might think, or you might feel better that you're doing something, but just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're doing something worthwhile. It doesn't mean you're not wasting Amazon's time, because you're wasting their time and your own time. At best, you're kind of talking past each other. You might actually get a response, but it might not be a helpful response, and they might take you back to square one. I don't see how that helps you out of it. But again, that's not a strategy. Winging it isn't a strategy. Panicking and throwing whatever you can at the wall to see what sticks, that's not a strategy. Relying on everything a support rep says, or an account health manager says, or an account health rep, or even your SaaS core manager says, and just mentally copying and pasting whatever they tell you to do and assuming that's going to be it, and the pain will be over and that'll slide through. That's not a strategy either, right? That's basically trial and error. And of course, and we hear from a lot of people, as I'm sure you would guess, that their appeals aren't even getting answered anymore. Or they sent the same escalation all over town, all over Seattle, and they're not getting any answers anymore. Well, of course they're not. And I'm surprised that they're asking me, why is Amazon ignoring me now? I look at the appeals for 5 or 10 minutes and I know exactly why they're being ignored. No strategy, no proper escalation language in there, no process really. I mean, when I say no strategy, I mean, there was no plan, but also there was no process in terms of how they laid out the information in the escalation email. And obviously no research or no higher level understanding of who escalations go to. So that's 3 or 4 mistakes off the top of my head that can be corrected if you do the opposite of what I just said. If you send escalations to the right place, if you do put in the proper language and structure them accordingly, don't make them 10-page booklets, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Quantity isn't necessarily quality, but think these things through. You can't necessarily look around every corner. You can't anticipate everything Amazon's going to do in response to an appeal. They might actually call you, right? The number on your Seller Central account, as opposed to answering every single escalation email individually. They might call just to jump ahead a little bit, but be prepared for these things. I see a lot of lack of preparation. I see some AI or ChatGPT written appeals or rewritten escalations. Just because you're changing things around by moving the top paragraph to the bottom paragraph to the top, that's not what I mean by changing content and not sending the same thing over and over. That's a very cosmetic, very superficial approach. It doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make it look like you care. And it doesn't make you look like you have any idea what escalations are or how they should be done. Questions on this, of course. We're doing escalations all the time. We're happy to talk you through it. Let me know. Chris at ecommercechris.com. Thanks.